So yeah, we need something.
And then the ordinance, we can have all that where, you know, most people when they buy a fence, even myself, I was gonna be a victim of it until I talked my wife out not doing it, is you wanna put the good side facing your property and the state side facing your neighbors. Well, of course, the problem is have the states on your property and the good side facing out. So that would be something we also could enforce in it. If they do apply for a permit, you have to have it put in the proper way. So that if y'all feel that that is adamant to do, Mr. Harvey can work on something over the next week or two while he's finalizing comments from tonight, and then we can go forward with it. Or if you guys want to just kind of keep it how it is and don't want to have the control over, let people still have the freedom to install their fences, we'll do whatever the pleasure of the planning board and town council is.
Well, you know, these neighborhoods have got those housing ordinances, whatever you call them.
Covenants, yes, sir.
Covenants, yeah. They even dictate the height of the
Right.
fence, so you ain't got high here, low
I
here,
think we
high
need to
here,
do
low.
that,
So
yeah.
I think if we're gonna do that, we need to make sure that we are uniform all the way across.
Correct.
Well, I don't know that we need to say like everything has to be 6 feet, but I think you can have like definitely a maximum height, because we don't want people putting up 20-foot fences in their front yard.
No.
Um,
6 foot, it's plenty high.
Right, so I think a maximum definitely, but I don't know that I'd put a minimum.
Well, think about 6 foot if you're doing a commercial establishment and they're trying to prevent theft. 8 is the standard, then 2 foot of barbed wire or razor wire.
Right.
So I would differentiate between
Right.
commercial and residential.
Yeah. In some towns prohibited barbed wire.
Right.
Some do.
Right.
I know one time, we don't, not one, but I know one other town I see in, they have it in there, no barbed wire fences for residential, but like Ms. Sears said, if you have commercial, you can't have that for safety precaution.
On home fencing, I think one of the things that's an eyesore is when somebody takes a fence, a wooden fence, that is only slatted on one side, and what I'm hearing, you turn the support sides outward,
Yes, sir.
and that's something that I think we should require to slat both sides.
Right.
Other than that, you know, chain link is the same on both sides, wrought iron's the same on both sides, vinyl's the same. But it's a slatted wooden fence that where one side, unless you slat both sides, is to me unattractive, uninviting.
Any other comments?
Have you reached out to other towns with similar situations?
I have Mr. Strickland, I checked the other towns I serve in, they all have fence ordinances, they all do charge for zoning permits to install the fence. And Ms. Jones probably can attest that she's been here, we do have some fencing companies, they do call the town, hey, we need to get a permit to install the fence, of course, we tell them no. But then once you tell them no, you don't never hear back from them, and you don't have no control over it. Then you got the situation we had last week with the call we got, where the lady said, neighbor hired somebody to install the fence and didn't take down the dilapidated one. And that's something that we could enforce. If you got one in existence, take it down, install your new one.
What kind of fees are we talking about?
Probably keep the same fee of $40 on the fee. I mean, we probably will talk with town manager Lance and financial director run, trust run to see what we think a good fee would be. But most towns charge the same as they charge for a zoning permit.
You want to require the homeowner to show proof of property line, expose the pins so our staff can go see, make sure you're gonna put the fence on your own property, because that happens more often than you think. The new fence goes in and it's not where it's supposed to be.
Well, having a survey done is expensive nowadays.
Yeah,
But
you know,
if you just have
most-
to expose the pins and
Yeah.
not do a survey, I think that's
Right.
sufficient. Because, yeah, sometimes doing a survey can be,
Yeah, I think a lot of folks don't know where the pins are.
I mean,
You're talking about the EIPs or existing iron pipe, the so-called a pin.
yeah.
like that.
You know, sometimes it's builder beware.
Or we can tell them, I know the other town, we got a rule of thumb in our ordinance, 2 feet off your property line. So if it falls on your property, the storm takes it over.
I don't love that, because then if you have two people who install
Right.
fences, you
You
have
got that
that
little gap.
fear. Yeah,
You got a 4 foot gap in between.
right, yeah.
How about the homeowner who wants to replace a bad section of fence? If they're taking down dilapidated and replacing with same but new, should we make them get a permit?
I would say no on that. I think they should just call the town and just let the town know. Cause you know you'll get a call, so we get his, or we just tell them, give us a call. So if anybody never call, we can let them know.
I think it would be wise, somebody's replacing is dilapidated with same.
Right.
That should be required, or even if it's a permit, but it's not a fee permit.
Right, yes.
Just make sure we're aware of it.
But I think we do definitely need to address it.
Yes,
Now, what happens with fences that are already up and don't comply?
grandfather did.
Grandfather in.
Grandfather did.
So that's 16-footer.
But if it ever falls down or if it gets
Yeah.
damaged in a storm or anything, then they will have to comply with the new rules
Okay.
of the ordinance.
It's a 60
But
foot
they're replacing and not installing brand new, so you make
Right.
sure you got to put a paragraph in there. To say if your grandfathered in and you have to replace, then you have to follow the new order.
Right. Anybody else got any more comments?
I was just gonna say, I think it's wise that we, look at doing this because we do know that Nashville is growing. And any community that's growing, this is one of the growing pains. And it would be better to be proactive than reactive. And so it saves us a whole lot by doing it this way and evaluating and not having to respond later.
Maybe we could have to go up to our wall, look at fence, everybody's got a fence out there
Right.
on the south side, at least on the south side. So just look at what they've got.
And I guess the same, the one other thing just to think about, there's there's fences to enclose yards, but then there's some screening
Right.
fences, which I guess would be addressed as well.
It could be, we could probably,
Or might
most
be a
of it,
section
they put the screen in if they're doing something in the backyard, a lot of people do backyard home repair. They put the screen in so, kind of keeps their eyesore out from the neighbors. So, I guess we could kind of put some perennials on that.
Yeah, and I was just thinking around mechanical units or, I don't know if there's any need to think about that, but, just that maybe not be considered, what is a fence, right?
Right.
I guess that definition.
Have we got it in the plans to put a fence around our new fire department?
We have, no, not the property fence, not around the property. They're, not required. There are, and I need to look back because I don't recall right off the top of my head, but around some of the stormwater, that sometimes that's required. But not the property.
Yeah, we don't even have a fence definition in our ordinance.
And the biggest thing that I was concerned about also is we had one in another town I was in, where we didn't have an ordinance in place, and somebody built a fence around the entire double wide, 6-foot fence in the front yard, so you can't see the house, nothing. It's all like a little, pretty much everybody in town call it a little fort.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be good, we just put that 3-foot height buffer, where if you're in your front yard, 3 foot, but everything in the back can be 6 to 8 feet.
A 4-foot front.
Right.
Something else, when we first moved in, we were thinking about putting in something very simple, just like a post with 2 pieces of wood post kind of thing, very visible because we're a corner lot. We didn't want there to be a visibility problem. And so that's something that you might, even if we have a 3-foot requirement to, like if you have especially a corner lot where people are turning, maybe to have, slats or something that you can be able to see the vehicles.
That's correct.
Yeah, we do have a intersection visibility
Okay.
requirement in the ordinance already, that you can't
Okay.
block visibility, even vegetation.
Sean, while you're doing fences, we have anything in here on gated access?
No, sir, we don't.
So Rocky Mount has a rule that even if it's a private drive, if there's at least 4 residents or business, and it's a gate, fire department must have access.
Okay.
Let's put an opt spot in or a radio activated opener. So it's actually more than 3 residents or businesses on a gated drive.
Yeah.
Fire department must have access.
That's something we could put in, because 9 out of 10, that's gonna probably,
While we're doing the fence, it might be a good time to go and slide it in.
right, exactly.
There might, I don't know this for sure, but there may be some state building code, fire code information on that, because I know there's access to property requirements within hydrants of 70 feet, so there could be some higher level requirements that would be a baseline.
The Readiness Center is the only one that I can think of that has a gate over their driveway. The,
The National Guard.
yeah, National Guard.
But in their case, it only services one, so they would be forced to,
Yeah.
I'm sure they do. I would imagine they have a Knox box. the main reason Rocky Mountain designed it was when Belmont went in, and you got 50 houses behind a gate,
Yeah.
and an unmanned guard shack, everybody walks up, swipes their card, and drives in. Rocky Mountain jumps in that quick as the development station says, no, you're gonna give us access. And that's, of course, private drives, thought they're private drive, private residence.
More comments? Any other comments?
If you guys had a chance to look at what Mike was prepared, he's added a bunch of new definitions. They were needed.
Much needed.
You know, it's been a good 25 years since our ordinance was drafted or created, and
Can you give us a page?
well, yeah, they start on pretty much on the page 7 of 221.
Okay.
Anything that's underlined is a new definition added to the ordinance. You know, community center, community farmers market, conditional zoning, evidentiary or hearings. I mean, obviously we know what that is, but it was just never defined in our ordinance. But there are a number of terms that, you know, 25 years ago didn't exist, they do now, or terms that did exist that have completely different meanings now. So I thought it was really good that, you know, he started out in the definition section, adding definitions to things that our ordinance regulates. Because oftentimes, when you enforce an ordinance like this, it comes down to the definition.
And he said, please feel free if you have any questions about definition, uses, see a use you may want to add, use you want to take out on the table, to let them know this evening.
So in that page 31 of 221, that's where it talks about conditional zoning districts. That's a new section that Michael added. That's how we're going to get away from special use permits, is with a conditional zoning district.
What page did you just?
Mine is page 31 of 221. Page 31, yeah. So,
So for some reason, even the second document that you sent, it came as like a finished document. It did not have any of the blue or yellow on it. I don't know
even
why.
this one here,
No, this has it.
Oh.
I can clearly see it.
I was wondering, I was asking Lou about that, maybe.
Yeah,
You have to turn on the tracking.
I don't know, maybe. I was on my phone, so it's possible.
I looked at what I sent, and it was in what I sent.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. It just wasn't showing up on my end, so when you sent the second one, I said, we're done. I don't need to respond.
I can print it for you.
No, it's,
Or you pull it
We're
up on
good.
your computer, it'll probably be there,
mhm.
not on the phone.
And you guys can see that even with the special use we have now, a few of the members already heard, but now the Board of Adjustments will hear all special use.
That's proposed.
That's proposed, it's not in stone yet.
You say that?
We have slated proposed for the Board of Adjustments to hear all the special use permit acts, all special permits.
So the decision-making on special uses wouldn't fall upon the council. They would go to the Board of Adjustment.
And then if they deny it, Superior Court, Nash County.
The way we have it right now for council members anyway, I mean, these are your constituents coming to you, and, you know, you're not, because it's a very formal quasi-judicial process, and you're not allowed to talk to them. And most constituents, well, wait a minute, you're my elected official,
Correct.
who am I supposed to talk to? I can't talk to you.
Put them on my back door neighbor,
Right.
known them all my life.
Yeah, that's one of the disadvantages of having an elected board or council, be the decision maker on special use permits with the quasi judicial process.
Many of the citizens just don't understand the formality that you have to go through as an elected official, that you cannot have that discussion.
Yeah,
And I think it's what in the other towns I'm in, the Board of Adjustment handles, and they have always told me, being on the board is just much easier because they can tell you, hey, we can't talk about it, just come to the hearing that night.
yeah.
And it's less pressure on the person telling them.
And they're a decision-making board that doesn't have to worry about getting reelected if you make decisions that aren't popular, which is often the case with a special use.
But it comes with no appeal process.
The appeals with district court.
Would be the court.
Yes. Or Superior Court, I'm sorry.
Superior Court.
There he is.
I heard voices, I'm sorry.
We saved
We
your
got
spot
right
right here, Michael.
You would think 3.5 hours would be enough time, guess what?
Everyone, this is Michael Harvey with InFocus. He's
Hi,
the consultant we've hired to help us redraft our zoning ordinance to eliminate as many special use permits as we can and replace their approval process with a rezoning, a conditional rezoning.
Good evening, folks. My sincerest apologies. Thank you all for your patience, however. Like I said, though, when you give yourself 3.5 hours to get here, you think it's going to be enough.
Where did it come from?
Michael. That ought to tell you.
Interstate 40, that's enough for today.
Well,
Going around wrong.
the fun started in Burlington, it didn't stop. So, without further ado, and again, I appreciate your patience. I want to thank you for the opportunity to help you. Sean and I have been joined at the hip in several projects for God knows how long.
Yes, sir.
So I was incredibly happy that your manager reached out to us. What I'd like to do is kind of talk about how we got here and go over the highlights and talk about the methodology I utilized, solicit your feedback, and go from there.
Searching, searching, searching. There we go.
I wish I could take credit for that. I can't. I just thank God they look like their mother. So, first of all, can I see a show of hands of who's the elected board, please? Who's here? Kyle, thank you. The rest are planning board members?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your volunteer service. So, when we were first hired, I had the pleasure of meeting with Shawnee, your manager. The first order of business, and forgive me as I get oriented, was to begin the process of figuring out how to take your current code and address what I'll call the overutilization of the special use permitting process by your Board of Adjustment to address approval of what should be legislative procedural items, rezoning requests. Special use permits are not generally used best when addressing what ought to be land uses that have specific design standards, where it's, does this meet this land use requirement? Does this meet this specific requirement for either land use area setback or whatnot? It's not meant to be prescriptive in nature. And I think part of the problem you've had, and let me just preface this, none of you are alone in this, because a lot of other communities have done the same thing, where you've applied a one-size-fits-all mentality to certain land use categories that try to shoehorn everything into a special use permitting process. And I think you've become frustrated with it. And again, you're not alone in that. So we were brought on board originally for the sole purpose of introducing to your ordinance the conditional zoning process and updating your code to make sure that you had what we call the best development tools in your toolbox. That included development agreements. That included making sure that your staff had in the ordinance described what their responsibilities were, what they could and couldn't ask for, and that your table permitted uses identified what was going to go through the conditional zoning process and what wasn't going to go through the conditional zoning process. When I met with your manager and with Sean, it became, and this is not meant to be derogatory, it's just meant to be truthful, your table permitted uses is very out of date. You're also not unique in that. A lot of communities have that problem. So I offered, much to my chagrin, to update your table permitted uses to try to make sure that as we tried to give you these tools, that we would give you a modern table permitted uses to try to address some of these issues to make it a little easier for you, your local residents, and your staff to implement this code. So, yeah, I've exceeded what the contract originally called for, but I voluntarily did it. Because there's no sense in me giving you a Ferrari body with a lawnmower engine. It's not going to do you any good, it's going to frustrate you a lot more. So with Sean's help, we began the process of going through your table of permitted uses, and with your manager's guidance, he and I began to craft a revised table. So what you have before you is an updated ordinance, a new table, and we're here tonight to kind of talk about that and need to start soliciting feedback. Everybody on the same page?
Can you pull the table?
And again, yeah.
They don't have the table in their.
Oh, okay. I'll pull up the table in a second. The other thing that I had to do at your manager's request was begin a comprehensive assessment to the best of my ability of where you all stand in relation to compliance with the state's minimum watershed ordinance and its required standards. Now, I'm still reviewing compliance with the state's minimum watershed rules. Your current ordinance has watershed standards, and I'm talking your zoning regulations, has watershed standards in 4 different sections and they contradict each other. That's a problem. You no longer have watershed standards in 4 different sections. You now have them where they're supposed to be in one central section. I'm still, at the request of your manager, reviewing your compliance with the watershed rules. And we may still have to do some work to help you make sure that you're going to be compliant. Now, I'm going to stress again, you're not unique in that. States change some of their minimum rules. A lot of communities are playing catch up. I have 3 former clients, as I've already shared with your manager, that I'm arguing with the state on their behalf about whether or not they should be considered in non-compliance or in compliance. Watershed rules are constantly shifting as to whether or not you should be allowed to do certain things or not be allowed to do certain things. So I think that you have a decent ordinance that needs to be reorganized, and that's what I've attempted to do here. Is it perfect? Probably not. We're going to get it perfect as best as we can. But I think that the feedback that I'm getting from you all tonight, the feedback I'm continuously getting from Sean, will help me get it there. Is that hopefully a good introduction to get you to where we need to be? So I want to show you your current table, which, as you'll note, from the draft you've been provided is read out, which means it's been deleted in its entirety. The problem with it is
You have.
You have
you have the current table that's shown as a track delete.
I think that starts on
Page
page
42.
42.
So it lists things in alphabetical order, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is when you list it in alphabetical order, you have certain land use categories that can appear out of kilter with other like similar land uses. For example, automotive repair uses may not necessarily fit. You may have them appear in one section of your code, and then they appear somewhere totally different in your code because they're also defined as a vehicle repair establishment instead of automobile repair establishment. And there's no uniformity with how you're treating them. That's a problem.
Or you see them once and you look no further.
Correct. And that doesn't necessarily help your staff figure out what's the best way to address that land use. Some of your terms are out of date. Family care home, for example, your current definition and how you handle it is totally inconsistent with state law. That's the recent change done by the North Carolina General Assembly in 2017. Again, don't feel bad. You're not the only community that is inconsistent with what happened with the recodification of 160D. Are you all familiar with what the State General Assembly did with 160D? Okay, here's the Reader's Digest version of it. Municipal authority to adopt land use regulation used to be in 168. That's the provisions of the general statute that codified everything to do with municipalities. That's where you got your authority to adopt land use regulation, zoning. Subdivision authority, that's where your authority to appoint boards of adjustment, planning boards, etc. existed. Counties was among 53A. The problem is there was so much cross-application of regulation and so much cross-referencing. And even though there was modernization of the code in the late 2000s, there were actually provisions that municipalities had to go to 153A and counties would even have to go to 160A to look up what requirements applied to a county or municipality in terms of dealing with advisory boards, advertising for public hearings, advertising for what used to be referred to as quasi-judicial hearings. That's variances, special use permits, etc. And terminology become antiquated. So the General Assembly decided to collapse all like regulatory standards into one central chapter, 160D. So instead of going to 153A or 160, you now go to 160D. Everything's in one central location because the authority is virtually the same. One just is applicable to counties, one is applicable to municipalities, but the authority is virtually the same. There's no sense in having it in two separate chapters. So the requirement for a county, for example, to advertise for a zoning map amendment when we change a zoning district is the same that you all have to do. So if somebody wants to amend your zoning map, change the zoning district, the advertising that has to be done is the same. Why should it be listed in two separate chapters in the general statute if it's the same? There's no call for that. Hence, 160D. Part of that also is, it means that municipalities and counties shouldn't be held to different standards on certain land uses, like solar facilities, or family care homes, or beehives. Just have it in one central section. And if you want to hold counties or municipalities to different standards, spell it out in 160D, instead of having people to cross-apply and go to two different, totally different chapters. Everybody follow me? That's a very grotesque synopsis over what took 3 years of planners, several attorneys, and members of the General Assembly to do. It was a sojourn, but we're in a much better place than we were before it was done. So I don't want to belittle the work that was engaged in. So what we are recommending is this. So this is, and we'll make sure you get copies of the updated table. You don't have this, so sorry. Part of that's because Sean and I are still trying to figure out what to do with some uses. So we're going to make sure you get this first of next week. We've broken it out. General residential districts, your A1, your R30, R15, R10, R6, R4, the districts you know and love. We're not changing your districts, at least your general districts. Your general non-residential districts, your office institutional, your B1, B2 district, your B2 is your downtown district, and your industrial district. I'm reserving a category for conservation. That could be your watershed overlay if we want to put it here. Right now, there's no land uses issues, with your conservation overlay yet. We'll probably talk about that at some point in the future, but right now, I'm just reserving this in case the town wants to have a conversation about it. And then I'm creating conditional districts. MHP is a manufactured home park district. So if somebody wants to develop a home park, a manufactured home park, or a recreational vehicle park, in order to do that in Nashville, what they'll have to do is apply for a zoning map amendment. They'll have to produce a site plan. That site plan will have to comply with the standards that you've probably seen in this document. That site plan will then go to your planning board for a recommendation. Have to come to you in a legislative hearing that'll have to be advertised consistent with every other legislative hearing that you always do. Meaning adjacent property owners get a letter, the property has to be posted with a sign, and you'll have to advertise in the newspaper. PUDs, planned unit development. That's going to be where your multifamily housing is going to live, for the most part. That's where your mixed-use development is going to live, where you have both single-family mixed-use and commercial. And then CZR, CZR, that's conditional zoning residential, conditional zoning non-residential. Those are districts where you may have a land use that you say, you know what? This land use is perfect for this property. But the general use zoning designation that allows 50 land uses, 49 out of those 50 land uses isn't perfect for this district. This allows the applicant to come to you and say, I want this specific land use. They have to give you a site-specific development plan. They have to provide you all elements of how they're going to propose this project and how it's going to comply with your code. It has to go to the planning board. It has to be advertised. It has to go to a public hearing. It comes before your board. Now, show of hands. Does everybody know how a conditional zoning process works? Not a problem. It's very easy. And don't fret you don't know, because if you've never really worked with it before, I understand it's foreign. Think of it as you creating a special zoning district. That's really all it is. A special zoning district where you get to see what the development is, where you get to know what the land use is, and you have a hand in actually recommending the conditions that'll regulate that project. The applicant has to comply with your code, and you get to recommend conditions. Now, there's a couple caveats. The conditions have to be mutually agreed to, and they have to be contingent upon that development project. I'll explain what that means in a minute. In fact,
For the council, an example of this would be our Project Sprout.
if you want to delve, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I also don't want you to get the specifics you can't. Is there, okay, I just read your face, that's fine.
It's manufacturing,
Okay.
it's retail, it's tiny houses, it's theater,
Okay,
it's,
that's a good example, then I don't want you to go any further. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if there was some specifics. I want to pull up, I don't want to lose you, I want to focus on the ordinance and soliciting feedback, but I do want to focus on something real quick. So, one of my many job duties is I do training throughout the state. This is one I did for Lowell. I want to talk about the conditional zoning process very quickly. Okay. We've talked about it must be mutually agreed to, the conditions. They run with the land, and they run with the land in perpetuity for that project. They can only be changed by the elected officials in a legislative hearing. So, here comes Michael. I want to do Harvey Landing. because I'm adventurous. And I want to do 1,000-unit, single-family attached multifamily project. And you all approve it, and there's 1,000 conditions on it. One of the conditions is that I have to have 200 acres of open space preserved as forest land, just untouched, undisturbed forest land. And that I have to have a nature trail around the perimeter of that forest. Everybody follow me? And again, I'm just giving the example, so I don't want to lose everybody in my example. Well, halfway through phase 4, I have a problem. My project is going so well. I don't want to have 200 acres anymore. I only want 150 because I want to take 50 acres and add more housing. I can't do that by right. I've surrendered that opportunity based on my approval. So I have to come back to Sean and your manager and say, I need to amend my conditional zoning district. And they smile. Say, great. Here's the application. File it. Show us what you're going to submit, all the necessary maps. Tell us what you're going to amend. Tell us why, and go through the process. Well, no, I'm just going to do it. No, you're not. You're amending a zoning district. It's just not done administratively. I have to go back through the process as if I'm amending any zoning district in your town code. Everybody follow me? Got to go back to the planning board. Got to be re-advertised. Got to come back to the town board. The town board could just look at me and go, and that's perfectly legal. You're under no obligation to approve that amendment. And I'm out of luck. And I can sit there and pout all I want. Town board's under no obligation to approve that amendment.
Does it take to stop you if you wouldn't start doing young injunction? Does it take to stop you if you start doing it on your own?
You revoke the permit and stop me basically from doing any development activity, period, end of sentence. And I then lose the right to do any further development activity at all. That's part of the,
About what legal?
because once you revoke the permit and once you revoke the rezoning, I no longer have development rights on the property.
You're gonna have to go through the court system, wouldn't you?
No,
That's my point.
no.
No.
So you say, no, I'm gonna keep on doing what I'm doing, so where is the process to stop you?
Well,
I'm not gonna go out there.
once you revoke it, once you revoke the development approval, if you continue, then all you have to do is go get an injunction through the court system, period, end of sentence. But if you do if you violate your ordinance, then not only have you lost the approvals, once you revoke it, you've got to go back through the process to get it back again. You don't automatically get it back. So you as a developer run the risk of, if you've alienated forgive this example, you bite the hand that feeds you and the hand slaps you and doesn't want to feed you anymore, you got to come make nice with the hand.
So once it's revoked, it's all revoked.
Yeah,
Not you get right to that portion.
correct. And you got to come back and beg permission again.
And an injunction is the vehicle that it's.
Yeah, if it goes that far, and well, this is probably my naivete, and I've done this 30 years. No developer in my professional experience has ever wanted to spend millions upon millions of dollars to have their development entitlements revoked and then have to come back before a board and face the ramifications of, I need to get my development approvals back. Really? Okay, well, this is what we now need in order for you to get your development approvals back. So,
Quick question, sorry.
please,
So, in that previous slide, it said that it needed to be mutually agreed upon. So
Yep.
I know lots of times when we're talking about property rights and people's, ability and right to do things, it's a big deal. So what if we cannot come to an agreement? What if
you
it,
don't approve the project.
and that's it?
That's it.
And they'll just have to do something within their rights?
Yep.
Okay.
You are in the driver's seat, but let's get to my next slide. Because there are some caveats. Your conditions have to be consistent with the nature of the project. And they can't be based on, not that you would do this, and I tell this to everybody I do the training with, not on some generic community wish list. So the example I'll give you is this. We get to, are these conditions legal? Do you all think you could regulate for, and I'm not gonna ask these questions as if I'm expecting answers from you all, I'm gonna cheat. Do you think you could regulate hours of operations of businesses? The answer is you can if you show a causal link as to why. If, for example, an applicant's proposing a commercial area right next to an external subdivision, you can say, look, to address concerns about noise and lighting, we're gonna ask that all commercial operations cease at 10 p.m., as an example. Do you think you can impose limits on the square footage of residential and non-residential development? Yes, you can. Do you think you could impose limitations on ownership of homes versus rental? I don't know how legal that would be in the court system, because if it's a single family residence I'm proposing, I don't know how that's regulatory in its face. If I'm proposing 100 single family residences and you say, well, they all have to be owned, I don't know, number one, how you're going to verify that. Number two, I don't know how you're going to enforce it. So I don't think a court would look upon that as a reasonable regulatory standard. Exterior building appearance, you can do that for commercial. You cannot do that for single family residences because there's actual state law that says you can do that. Landscaping, screening, outdoor lighting, oh yeah, you even have regulations in your ordinance that address that. Access management connectivity, yes, with a caveat. If you have regulatory issues and standards addressing access management connectivity relating to the area in which this project is located, you've got, for example, transportation studies that show the intersection where this project is, the intersection's failing. You can compel and require roadway improvements. If there's a roadway 2 miles down the road, no. Well, this intersection down here is failing. Has nothing to do with this development. There has to be a rational nexus and a causal link connecting the development to the improvement. You just can't have a wish list saying, well, if you're going to do this development, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. And unfortunately, there's ample case law, and it's not just the Raleighs and the Carys and the Charlottes that this applies to. It's a lot of different communities that have unfortunately gotten hit by this. So you will have to be cautious that if you want to require offsite improvements, there has to be some causal link that this project is causing the need for that offsite improvement.
What happens if the developer says, the Blaze Property says, we're gonna have a homeowners association, this development would require that, the appearance of the buildings have to be enforced on them.
No, perfectly
They
fine.
pointed out to us, we said, oh, great, we'll tell you, this unit's required to be owner occupied. We're not gonna allow rentals in this PUD,
Perfectly legal.
as long as we didn't put that on.
Well, you didn't put it on them, and you're not responsible for enforcing it. That's on them and the local HOA. And here's the other kicker. If local residents call you up and complain, town has no authority to enforce local covenants and is not responsible for the enforcement or interpretation of local covenants. That's between you and the HOA.
Very good.
No home occupations by the HMO.
If they want to enforce it, that's fine. But they need to be put on notice that that's an HOA issue, not a town issue. And the town is not responsible for
We allow
addressing that. Correct. And I've had that happen, and it's like, fine, you need to put it in every one of your documents that we prohibit home occupations, not the town. Because when they call the town, and I've enforced planned developments and conditional zoning districts with this. Sorry, the applicant and the developer has prohibited this. We cannot permit it. Your issue is with them, not with us, sorry. But can't you? No. Can't, no. But, sorry. But it's denying our right. You should have read the documents more carefully when you bought into the project. And I'm sorry, but that is the unfortunate reality. It's like anytime you buy into a subdivision that has an HOA, you needed to read the rules.
Yeah.
It's like any subdivision you buy into that has a minimum house size. I don't want to build a 2,000 square foot house. I respect that. But guess what?
On the wrong subdivision.
On the
Yeah.
access, back to the access management, does that also have caveats to deal with parking? For instance, I mean, we have a courthouse down here in a downtown district that has no requirement, but, you know, I mean, it's a huge deal being for parking.
Well, I'm going to answer that question in two ways. First of all, you have a parking ordinance, and I would suggest to you that as you're looking at conditional zoning projects, your parking rules will be applicable. Oh, God bless you. And they should be held accountable to your parking ordinance. Remember, conditional zoning districts are not exempt from your code. They have an obligation to comply with your code or propose a design alternative that is similar. They just can't say we're not going to provide parking. Because what you all are going to say, what your staff's going to say is, that doesn't work for us. Going through the conditional process doesn't exempt them from complying with your code. It just means that they're going through this process and say, this is how we're going to comply with your ordinance, and these are the land uses we're going to develop in on this particular property. So that's partly answer one. Answer two is, I think, unfortunately, part of your problem in your downtown area is because it is your downtown area, there is some, and you're not unique, and I know that doesn't help address this problem, and I apologize. This is something Sean and I can talk about as well. Most cases, parking in downtown districts are usually handled either with the provision of public parking or through public-private partnerships for parking, or on-street parking that is either somehow regulated with enforcement of metered parking or limited parking, like an hour or 2 hours, where there's enforcement for turnover. But unfortunately, there are times when parking occurs or land uses are brought in that aren't counted as their total impact on the overall parking need for the area. And yes, it exacerbates an existing major issue. I hope as you move forward in embracing the conditional zone process, what's remembered, and your ordinance does cover this as it's been rewritten, applicants still have to comply with the code. So they will still have to demonstrate compliance with your parking standard. They're not exempt from it. But if you have concerns on parking, what'll happen is your planning board and you all on the elected official level will say, hey, developer, we're not, and the biggest example I'll give you is when it comes to multifamily or single family attached residential parking, well, you've provided ample parking, let's say, for the residences, but what about visitors? We're concerned about how you're going to handle visitors. And we'd like to see how you're going to handle that. Those are always questions that come up even in the High Points and the Durhams and the Raleighs that I work in. So that's something to consider as you're looking at those development projects. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and you did, mostly, but as opposed to complying with parking requirements, in some districts, we have none, right? Yeah, there are some districts that probably need them, but there are none. So, I guess that's sort of I hear that a lot with other places we work with.
I'm sure Sean and I can talk about it in a little more detail, but that may have to come after we fix this. And I'm more than happy to work with your manager and Sean and the rest of the staff to have that conversation.
And it may not be the right thing to do in certain zones. I mean, I totally get that, but.
No, I think that there's opportunity to have that conversation.
It doesn't relieve the need for it.
So one thing you'll notice different about the proposed reorganization, what I like to try to do with my table of permitted uses. So we provided the manager and Sean and the rest of the staff with two options. The option that I'm going to propose to you, and what this option is based on is the notion that you define land use categories. You try to do it in alphabetical order to the land use category. So we have an agricultural category, an assembly land use category, which is where people come together for whatever reason. And it lists out uses, activities, whatnot, automotive transportation, and you break out the uses that you want to hyper-regulate or you want to prohibit. I hate to say it that way, but that is where we're going with this. The other option that we've done for clients that I'm less of a fan of, and we decided not to recommend to you all, is this option. This is one that I regulate or administer for the town of Biscoe, North Carolina. This is a laundry list, table permitted uses, that lists every land use in alphabetical order. Gets a little confusing, but this is what the town of Biscoe asked for. This is what their board wanted. There's nothing wrong with it. But it gets a little busy. I'm not trying to poo-poo it, but ABC liquor store, accessory dwelling unit. This is kind of the example of what I had concerns with your current code. Accessory dwelling unit is a residential land use. It really needs to be with the residential land uses, not in the A's. At least that was the argument I used with the staff, and they were kind of wholeheartedly behind me, so I kind of went this route, to be honest. So we break everything down by land use category. And yeah, we've defined a lot of new uses for you. And let me show you what the symbology means. Permitted, it's permitted by right, meaning with zoning compliance permit staff. The delta, which is the small triangles, permitted within a district subject to compliance with development standards. That means any standard that we've developed. S is permitted issuance of a special use permit. Now, special use permits are going to be going to your Board of Adjustment from now on, and I'll explain why in a minute. And then no symbol means it's not permitted in any district. Now, we've spelled out here specifically bona fide farm operations. I want to remind you all that per state law, they're allowed by right with no zoning review in your ETJ. That's under state law. Can't do anything about it. You can't touch them. Can't regulate them. You're not going to be able to do anything with them. I, for 20 years, was the current planning administrator in Orange County, North Carolina. I spent 4.5 years in court on one farm case with 4 to 6 different appeals. I never want to do that again. I've had my fill of farms and what constitutes a farm and what constitutes agritourism activities. You don't want to do that to yourselves. So what we've done is taken your existing table of permitted uses and condensed a lot of the activities into these categories. Assembly land uses, banquet hall. And again, I don't want to, what we'll do is send you this and let you give me some feedback. I don't want you to get lost in some of what we're proposing. Club or lodge, that's like the Moose Lodge, or any civic or other organization. What I will explain to you is you can't specify that this has to be a nonprofit. Doesn't matter if it's nonprofit or for-profit. It's the same gathering of people for a social or fraternal purpose. It doesn't matter if it's for profit or not. You can't regulate a land use on its for-profit or not-profit status. That's illegal. Community center, museum, a meeting facility, retreat, conference center. We are recommending that it be permitted with standards in your A1 district. It be allowed in, I think it's your R10 district, Sean, because that's where you currently allow it with a special use permit. Again, going to the Board of Adjustment.
Right.
Be permitted in your OI and B1 district with compliance with various standards. Place of worship, that's a church. Why isn't it called a church? Because technically a church has one specific connotation, and a place of worship actually is more inclusive. A church It's been argued in the courts only refers to Christian faith, and that's not what it is. And I'm really not interested in seeing you all go to court because somebody gets it in their craw that they should sue you for a quick buck. I want to remind you that state law was amended that if somebody wants to take you to court and sue you for a land use decision and they win, you are subject to paying them all their court fees. So part of my job when I work with communities is to keep you out of court to the best of my ability because I don't like communities losing in court. Theater, we've broken it up into indoor, outdoor, which includes amphitheater. Automotive transportation. Remind me, you guys don't allow airports currently, correct?
Correct.
All right, so I've kept it blank. Now, what does blank mean as a reminder? It's not permitted anywhere. Convenience store without fuel pumps and sales, with fuel pumps and sales, that's your gas station. Motor vehicle, maintenance, repair, sales. What's the difference between maintenance and repair? Maintenance is oil change, simple maintenance on the car. Repair is body work. Why do you want the distinction? Your ordinance would allow simple maintenance in your B2 district. I don't think you all want repair in your B2 downtown district, at least how I read your ordinance. And you all may give me some feedback telling me to change my mind, which is fine. But how I read your ordinance, that wasn't something you were interested in. Care and educational facility, care center, in-home care, that's daycare, that could be child or adult. Doesn't have to be distinguishable. It's distinguished by the applicant. Facility is what you would normally call your assisted living or in-home care facility for the elderly. Library, I think, is commonly understood. School, we broke out for you. Elementary, middle, and high is, I think, easily understood.
And they're allowed in all with conditions.
Allowed with conditions. Now, what are the conditions? Well, I think you all need to have an understanding of where parking is, setbacks. You've got to know where how access and access management is going to be done. I think you need an understanding where bus parking is going to be. Your ordinance needs a little bit more oomph to it. I'm sorry to say it that way, but that's the case. Performing arts, sports, recreation, what is this? Karate, martial arts, dance schools. There's nothing wrong with them, but you need a distinction as to what they are. University college, you allow them. This is also going to be distinguished between vocational trade, skill, and training. They're different. Where does community college go? Right here. Where would a technical school go? Right here. Why the distinction? This is potentially publicly owned and maintained. This is a private institution. Why should there be a difference? This is going to be a grander scale, grand design. This could potentially go into an existing unoccupied retail space, like an office space, and have less of an impact. Extractive land uses, quarries, mines, only allowed through special use permit. Government land uses, they're allowed everywhere, except those we split out. ABC stores, detention centers, prisons, and armories. Now, what is government land use? Police, fire station, or any other government land use. What are the standards? Making sure that there's good buffer, appropriate setbacks from residential uses, etc. Everybody following me so far? And again, I'm not trying to whiz through this and lose anybody. I'm just trying to make sure everybody understands what the logic is. Manufacturing, assembling, and processing. We've created two distinct land use categories. Why? Because it usually breaks down into it's either food or not food.
Yeah.
And most people have more concerns about non-food than food. Yes, ma'am.
Your distillery and microbrew is different than the one I have.
Yeah, we actually had to make some edits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you all will get this after
Just need
tonight.
to make sure we were addressing
No, no.
construction and
Yes, ma'am.
downtown.
Those were the edits we had to work
Okay,
on.
thank you.
We've had to make some changes to this to address some of the staff's comments, and after we talk, you'll get this after this weekend, so you can give me additional comments, so. Now, I've left out seafood preparation, packaging and distribution in the slaughterhouse, also starch, vegetable, fats, and oils manufacturing. Seafood preparation, packaging, and distribution I've left off because odor. Unless you all tell me that you think it's reasonable. And again, think about it. It's not, you don't have to look at me tonight and say, we want it. Slaughterhouse, I've had people tell me during meetings like this, well, what about farms? Farms are exempt from zoning. So if you're a bona fide farm in the ETJ and you want to have a slaughterhouse, remember, just because it's not checked on this list doesn't mean anything. Because you can't regulate farm activity. Remember that. You're a bona fide farmer in your ETJ, you can have a slaughterhouse on your farm as part of your farm operation. And town can't do squat about it. If you're a bona fide farm, you have to be a bona fide farm in the ETJ.
It can't be Tyson, the company, Tyson Foods.
Well, if it's on a farm,
Interesting.
yeah. Yes. What constitutes a farm?
No, I thought,
Okay.
I
And do we
thought you were
define that?
grandfathered, I thought you were grandfathered in and you changed the nature of your farming operation. You know what the change is. No, evidently I'm wrong.
If you meet the statutory definition of a bona fide farm in NCGS 106-5A1.1 and 160D 903, you're a farm, period, end of sentence. You all and no other unit of local government can define what a farm is. It's state only gets to do that.
So we don't have a definition of farm.
You will not after I'm done.
Okay.
You would defer to the state.
What is the definition of farm?
Okay. Per 106-581, state says that farm or farming is cultivation of a crop, animal husbandry, and the byproducts of animal husbandry or cultivation of crops. It's longer than that. I'm paraphrasing a little badly. I'll be honest with you. Okay. For 160D 903, bona fide farm activities includes all farming activities as defined in 106-581.1. And it effectively says that and this is my word choice, so I don't want to confuse anybody. Prima facie evidence as to what constitutes a bona fide farm is normally you're enrolled in present use value with your local tax office. You have a forest management plan from the North Carolina Department of Forestry. You have a sales tax exemption certificate from the North Carolina Department of Revenue, or you file Schedule F of your federal income tax. Now, let me blow your mind even more. State and courts have said local planning staff can't use the absence of any one of those, and you're only required to have one technically. But the local planning staff can't use the absence of any one of those as a determining factor to say you're not a bona fide farm if you meet the criteria established under 106-581.1 to say you are engaged in the cultivation of the crop or you're engaged in animal husbandry. The only time it becomes important to have enrollment in the present use value program or to have the qualifying sales tax exemption certificate under North Carolina Department of Revenue is if you want to engage in agritourism activities in a structure erected for bona fide farm purpose. I.e., you want to have weddings in your barn.
Wedding venue.
How do I know that? Because I spent 4 years in court.
Does anybody else need or want a water?
So, the only time it becomes important is when you're dealing with property in your ETJ. You can regulate bona fide farms in your corporate limits. The only place you can't do it's in your ETJ. Everybody on board with me? Okay. But that's why slaughterhouse isn't picked. Why don't I think you want slaughterhouses? Noise, smell, noise,
Sewer plant can't handle it.
noise, sewer plant, noise,
Smell.
smell. Starch, vegetable oil, and oils manufacturing, odor. That's a tremendous smell. I ain't gonna kid you. It's an odor. Tobacco processing, obviously you currently allow it in your I-1, so I didn't see the need to say no. And again, that doesn't mean you can't do it on a bona fide farm in UTJ. It just means that I've got it in your I-1. Manufacturing, assembling, and processing, other, which is exactly what you think it is. Most communities don't want ammunition manufacturing, so I didn't check it, but you're going to give me some feedback. Chemical manufacturing and processing of only pharmaceutical and medicine. That's going to be permitted in your I-1 district. Chemical manufacturing and processing of anything other than pharmaceutical and medicine is blank, which means it's not permitted. You've got language in your current code that says you will not allow manufacturing operations that use harmful or noxious chemicals. So I basically determined that that meant you don't want this. Concrete processing, you actually do allow it currently, so I put it in the code. Converted paper product, that's assembly of boxes and other paper products. It's not a pulp mill, that's actually in this code later, not listed anywhere. So you're not gonna have a paper mill. If you all don't want it, I'll say it, sorry. Same with firearm manufacturing. If you want it, you just need to give me the feedback. Foundries, I didn't list it. Leather allied product manufacturing, I've listed that as permitted, but not leather and hide tanning, because that's a totally separate process. That's the actual chemical alteration of raw leather, and there's an odor, and I just didn't see you all wanting that in the community of this size. Metal fabrication, yes. Paperboard containers and boxes, yes. Petroleum and coal product processing. Some communities want this because they think that it's important to allow this as asphalt plants. I'm going to let you all give me some feedback. I don't ascribe a value judgment to this, but I'll let you give me some feedback. If you're going to allow it, I'm going to recommend you do it with standards. I have standards that I'm going to throw at you. So, think about it.
Asphalt plant,
Yeah,
it doesn't smell good either.
I know. But one of the critiques I often hear is, well, where else is the necessary asphalt going to come from that we're going to need to help build our community?
Right.
And that's, it's a catch-22, and I get that, and I'm not, and again, I don't make a value judgment on it. I usually, as part of this process, say, you tell me what concerns you. I can develop a standard to address any concern you have. But I don't like looking people in the eye and telling them, oh, this is what you should do, and then have you, well, we don't want that. Okay. I'd rather you tell me, if you can show us a standard that'll make us address our concerns about odor or this, that, and the other, we'd like to see it, no problem. I can do that. Printing, that is exactly what it sounds like. It's mass production of print products, and there's no reason not to allow it. Pulp, paper, paperboard mills, that's exactly what it sounds like. That's pulp mill, paperboard mill. And no, you're not going to permit it. And bluntly, this is not the right area for that. But research facility, this is becoming more popular. That's with and without manufacturing. I broke it out. So with manufacturing, it's only going to be in your industrial district. Without manufacturing, just pure research. That's going to be in your OY, B1, and I1. So pure research, why wouldn't you want to allow it? Sawmill, I1. Medical land uses, doctor's offices, with standards. Hospital, the big condition is you got to have certificate of need from the state.
Now go back to the previous one. What
Yeah,
about
sorry.
fireworks, manufacturing of pyrotechnic.
Where did I put that?
Note to
Good
self.
question, note to self, I don't remember what category I threw that in. Okay, sorry. Vet clinic, no boarding or vet hospital facilities. And then a vet hospital, spelling out where they can go. This is not a kennel under vet clinic. So veterinary clinic where you can take the dog and the cat just to get looked at, but there's no boarding, no overnight boarding. And then a veterinary hospital where there is potential boarding and vet hospital in different districts. Predominantly in the B1 and the I1. But a simple clinic can go in most districts.
As would a grooming operation
I was just about to ask.
Well, grooming,
that does boarding?
well, no, grooming is actually under services.
Okay.
And I would probably suggest to you that a veterinary clinic or a veterinary hospital is not where, I would say that it's incidental grooming to take place in both.
Yeah.
Because it's incidental to the principal land use. But if you're talking about a veterinary grooming clinic, that's covered under services under a kennel. Office, exactly what you think it is, professional office. I wanted to split out building trade contractors with and without storage. With outdoor storage is only going to be permitted in your industrial district. That's the boneyard where they're storing all the trucks. Has to be fenced, has to be buffered. I listed pawn shop and payday loan. I don't know your current code. I was not familiar. It didn't seem readily apparent to me if you allowed them or didn't. I kept them blank, so I'll solicit feedback from you all on it. Sean and I are going to be working on your recreational land uses. But we've got amusement parks, botanical gardens, summer camps, golf course, driving range, golf chip and putt course, motocross, paintball, airsoft, that general park, recreation facilities, indoor, outdoor, racetrack, that's both vehicular and horse. Shooting range, indoor, outdoor, which you have current standards on, and I've got built into the code, so I'm gonna come up with a list of where I think they go based on your current code. Sean's gonna correct it for me.
And fairgrounds are back at the top under
Yep.
assembly?
Yep. So,
Vaping smoke shops.
I got it on the list.
that is gonna end up going under services.
We're gonna take all of the boxes and make them blank, right?
Well, if that's what you want.
Might be
Is
challenged.
that where a marijuana dispensary go, service?
Well, unfortunately, we'll have to deal with marijuana shops. Seed,
With,
cannabis.
with the vape shop, can we put a 500 feet buffer from schools as additional standards? Playgrounds, park
You could
facilities?
probably do a separation requirement.
Okay, that'll be perfect.
Have a maximum?
No, you can't do a maximum.
What would
Separation requirement should handle it though.
What'd you say about marijuana dispensaries?
We're gonna have to figure out cannabis, because that's coming.
Yeah, the legislature's not gonna give up on it.
No. Well, technically cannabis dispensaries are CDBG, not CDBG. CD, thank you. That's what I was dealing with all morning, sorry. In High Point, there are 2 dispensaries. There are applications for cannabis dispensaries. It's coming, it's gonna happen.
Yep.
I'd rather provide it and then have it blank and then let you address it later.
Okay.
Okay?
So when
Now,
you say separation requirements, does that mean like the
Yes.
store?
half mile distance or 1,000 foot or whatever I come up with, yeah.
5 miles.
We did 500 from the school, church, park,
Yeah.
offices in other towns.
I've got to figure out how best to do that. I'm going to be a little stuck, to be honest.
5 miles for churches.
It can't be, here's the problem. Vape shops are not identified under the statute, state law, as being an abusive use, like a sexually oriented business, adult entertainment. So as a result, you can't be overly regulatory in terms of a setback standard. I think you can reasonably establish a limit, but you can't be so arbitrary as to say because you will go to court, you will lose, in my opinion. But you can sit there and say there can't be, let's say, a vape shop within 500 feet of one another. I don't think that's a problem. The other thing we're probably going to have to do for you is sweepstakes operations with the same regulatory standard. Okay. Residential, campground, RV park, right there. MHD, only permitted. And you do have standards, as you've probably looked at in your code. A lot of it is what's permitted, how the park has to be set up, what are the setbacks. And remember, as it goes through the process, the applicant is obligated to demonstrate compliance with all those standards. And if they don't meet the standards, it doesn't go through the process. That's why you got a beautiful staff here. You pay them very well, they do a great job, and they're going to continue to do a great job. Dwellings. Dwellings, single family, two family, manufactured home, they're going to be limited to your A1 district. It's only going to be double wides. Okay? Or the mobile home park.
Yeah.
Right.
Multifamily, single family attached, townhomes, apartments, or condominiums. Originally, I just had this as multifamily homes, and it was only going to be in the PUD. We had one comment from one of the elected officials who could not be with us tonight, who understood why I did it that way, but he asked if we could have more specificity, which that's fine, I can put it out there. My concern is this. I think his comment was directly related to, he wanted to be able to identify land uses as related to providing distinctions between rental versus non-rental. And the problem is, it doesn't matter. It's a residential unit, it's a residential occupancy. It doesn't matter if it's for rent or not, it's still the same impact. But I'm certainly not interested in undermining the great work that your current staff or your previous planning director, who I worked with in Vance County, did. So I provided the breakdown. There's no reason to not do that. So there we go. Family care home is permitted in every residential district. Why? Because state law says so. There is a half-mile separation requirement because state law gives you that authority. Group home is only going to be allowed with a special use permit to the Board of Adjustment, and there are standards. Okay. Health and personal care facility, that's exactly what you think it is. RVs, prohibited, can't use, except here. But the goal listing it separately is so people can't pull an RV onto an undeveloped parcel of property and say, I want to live in it. It's not what your ordinance allows. Okay. Rooming house, there was some concern that we were somehow prohibiting rooming houses. They're going to be allowed with standards. Temporary residential use. I want to build a house. I need someplace temporary to live. What we're recommending is that you allow manufactured housing as a temporary residential use. And once you get a CFC, that's a certificate of completion. That means you can live in the house. You have to pull the mobile home off the property. Retail. Permitted, subject to standards. And there are limitations on square footage for most of the districts, or there's requirements for outdoor sales, limitations on outdoor displays, etc. Service uses.
Can we back up?
Please.
When you mentioned RVs while ago, and I bring this up because it happened to me some years ago.
Okay.
I had to have my residence remodeled. We couldn't live in it. So while it was being done for that 3 months, 3 or 4 months, we lived in the RVs parked out in the backyard. So that not permissible under this new rule, new standard?
Now, let me ask you this question. Was this your existing RV you already owned that was already on the property?
Yes, sir.
I actually don't think that would be inconsistent with what the current ordinance would allow. What this stops is you having an undeveloped parcel of property. No house, no nothing on it, and pulling an RV and saying, I want to live on the property of my RV.
Okay.
But thank you for asking, it's a good question. Service land uses, you'll see that some are permitted by right, I1, B1, limited to certain standards. Body art tattooing, only in certain districts with certain standards. Car wash, cemetery, crematoria is only going to be allowed in the I1. That's the only real place you really should allow a crematoria. Eating and drinking establishments, that's restaurants and nightclubs. Funeral home. Do you all currently have any funeral homes outside of your industrial district? It's a little vague in your current code. Okay. Where? Which district?
The one this RT is right across the street by the school.
Yeah,
In a residential district?
yeah.
Okay.
And
Sure do.
they do have,
Crematoria.
they do cremations there.
Okay, then I'm gonna have to come up with a standard. Garden center, junk salvage yards, only gonna be permitted in industrial district. Kennel, boarding and grooming services, to answer your question directly, right here.
Yeah,
That's gonna be permitted in the B1 and the industrial district. Massage business, gotta be a certified masseuse. Sexually oriented businesses, you cannot under state law prohibit them, sorry.
So what?
but you can say where they go.
Is that it?
So where are we putting them?
The industrial district. And they gotta be 1,200 feet from all sensitive uses, schools, churches, residences, etc., which you can't prohibit them. Nope. Hang on one second. So this is North Carolina General Statute 160D. So per 902, you may regulate businesses through zoning, licensing, or other appropriate local ordinances, and you can restrict their location, but you can't prohibit, and you can establish reasonable separation requirements, but you can't prohibit them, per 160D 902. So 1,200 linear feet, excuse me, is what we're recommending you employ. That has passed the sniff test in the courts. That's a bitter pill to swallow, I know, but short-term rental. This is hotel, motel, bed and breakfast. Post-occupied is bed and breakfast. That's where the host lives on site. Permitted in your A1 district with standards, special use permits in 2 of your residential districts. And here it's with standards in your commercial districts, okay? Storage of goods, indoor and outdoor, standards. If it's outdoor, it's gotta be buffered. Taxidermy, warehousing, permitted in your I1. Sean and I are gonna have to come back and figure out how to handle telecom towers. We currently don't allow them. I don't know how you all have gotten away with that. Good on you. We're going to figure that out. Utility uses. I'm going to have to work with your manager on waste management land uses, because I have some questions that the current ordinance doesn't really answer for me. And then wholesale trade, that's exactly what it sounds like. It's permitted only in your B1 and I1, and it's going to be permitted as a conditional zone non-residential land use. Any major surprises that I need to address for you all?
What's an example of a wholesale trade land use?
Cash and carry store, where I can go in and buy bulk.
Okay. Costco?
No,
It's more retail.
that's more retail. This is
Building
a,
supplies.
yeah, this is
Building supplies.
discount. Well, Home Depot would be retail. Cash and carry would be more of, I don't know of a good regional example, but a grocery vendor that does business out to the public as well as vendors would be a good example. Like a wholesale fruit dealer, where they do mass fruit sales, where, you know, wholesalers could go and buy fruit for distribution, or the general public could go and just buy fruit. That's a wholesale.
Williams Foods, we have a cash and carry service counter. They supply grocery stores across the state. They have a little bitty cash and carry counter for limited items. That'd be a great example.
Okay.
They're on
So-
Rocky Mountain, big facility.
I know some of you may have questions,
That's right.
but very quickly what I want to do is this. So I've revised your definitions. I've added new standards establishing, because one of the things that shocked me, and I hope the footnotes provided useful to you all, at least explaining some of the logic that we employed. You didn't have, for example, clear sight triangle street intersection regulations, which concerned me, so you now have them.
And that would apply to fences, shrubbery, hedges?
Yep, and I'm gonna have to come up with some language dealing with B2, which we discussed.
Yeah.
Another concern I had is that your current ordinance, for some reason, and Sean and I both had a nice laugh at this, current ordinance, for some reason, the dimensional chart was missing. It's now been re-added, explaining the minimum lot size, setbacks. Don't ask me why, neither of us could figure it out, but we've
It's on
added.
page 29 there.
Yep, I'm on page, thank you, 29.
Is that the reason that that duplex in Clarendon Drive almost messed up?
I don't know. We've added notes on how setbacks are interpreted that didn't exist, which includes structures and uses limited in yards. We've added a whole new wonderful section beginning on page 31 defining conditional zoning districts that I know you all love reading. I add somewhat facetiously, I'm sorry. I think everyone will want to read page 35. This is the watershed standards. We've tried to consolidate every watershed rule into one section instead of 4 separate sections of your code.
Thank you.
Regarding watershed, can we do requirements that give greater protection?
Yes, but, and there's a but, if you want to do greater protections than the state minimum model, you will have to submit your ordinance to the state to get it approved prior to enforcement. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do it, just word of warning. You will have to submit it to Paul, I think it's Paul Clark who's still in charge of the ordinance revision. And give me an idea of what kind of standards you're looking to enforce greater than the minimum model.
Just density, I would say.
Okay. Let me just say this. I was the watershed administrator in Orange County for 20 years, along with the zoning administrator and the floodplain administrator. And for 5 years, the stormwater manager and erosion control supervisor, okay? I wore a lot of hats. We had one of the most restrictive watershed ordinances in the state. And we went and defended it before the state Environmental Management Commission on at least half a dozen occasions in the 20 years I was there. To a point where we had to write a 300-page report telling the state where to go, how to get there, and I took great delight in telling them where to go and how to get there. Okay. It's not a problem, but you better have your ducks in a row as to why, and you need to make sure if you're increasing density, you have to have a zone where you're allowing the density to go when you increase it. So where I'm going with that is, if you're saying, in this particular portion of the watershed, we want to ensure that density, let's say, is 1 dwelling unit for 5 acres of property, where it would normally be 1 to 2. Okay, I'm just throwing this out as the example. You have to have a corresponding district where you're going to allow hyper or more development to kind of even it out, so the state says you're being reasonable, so you're not taking away people's property rights to do reasonable development. And that's one of the things Orange County did, is we actually enforced a higher degree of density in critical watersheds, where we actually had a density limitation of 1 dwelling unit for 5 acres of property, where the state only required 1 to 2. But we transferred density out of the critical watersheds to what we'll call WS3, and allowed for clustering where we allowed more density. And the state finally said that we were golden. So, yeah. Yes,
Is
sir.
that the language you use in this document right here? When you talk about density credits, is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
When you swap it
That's your
with-
current ordinance, yes.
Okay.
I only used your current ordinance. I did not play around with it. And the reason being is I don't,
So the word density credits in our current ordinance?
yes,
Okay, good to find it, that's, you
Oh, yeah.
explained what I was looking for.
and I did that just to make sure I kept you legal. One of the other areas of concern I had is that I've provided an explanation that there are uses permitted as a matter of right, which includes customary accessory land uses to principals. I don't think I need to list storage sheds as a principal land use. I mean, no, it should be understood. So I've got that listed if you go to page 40. Utility facilities located within the public right-of-way. Off-street parking is a required accessory use to a permitted use. That should be considered allowed in every district.
Michael, can we have something that regulates how many backyard storage
Bless you.
you can have?
Right,
Yeah, if you'd like.
So that, you can't fill the backyard with
right.
16 of them.
Right.
You can, no more than 30% of the backyard.
Well, what you can do, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either do it as a percentage of the single-family residence, so you can't do more than 50% of the principal dwelling unit,
Okay,
or you can do it that way, or you can say it's based on the size of the property and it can't be more than 30% of the size of the parcel. So yeah, there's a couple of options I can throw out there for you all to consider.
Back on page 40, page 6. Also, that city had solid waste collection facilities in the right of way. What facility would be in the right of way? A container would be in the right of way. What facility would be in the right of way?
So I added that because I didn't know if you all managed collection facilities for the public to bring in. And if you don't, I was going to delete it.
Convenience site.
Yeah,
we do,
so watch this.
we do curbside collection.
No, that's not what we were.
We do that in disaster situations.
No, that's something different.
Okay.
Okay.
Some communities run convenience sites. I kept that in there just in case. You've answered the question.
What
so.
we have is the gates are left unlocked during the day.
Yeah.
If you catch them not looking at that shop, you get back in.
Fair enough. We've defined what special use permits is, and remember, they're gonna go to the Board of Adjustment. They're not gonna go to the town board anymore.
That's proposed.
Proposed,
Yeah.
correct. That's my recommendation, I'll say it that way. Conditional districts and conditional zoning, there are certain land uses that you all should not allow through that process. Why? They should only be permitted in the manner in which your ordinance specifies. For example, airport, general aviation airports. Now, I understand you don't allow them, but you shouldn't allow an applicant to come in and say, I want to do a heliport through the conditional zone process, which means I'm going to do it here. No. It's only allowed the way the ordinance says so.
Would the readiness center from the reserves, which is here in town, be exempt of that?
It would be exempt because that's part of the armory. I'd say it's part of an armory land use.
So they can land the helicopter
Yep.
there?
Or a hospital,
Okay.
if it's part of a hospital use. Sexually oriented businesses should not be allowed to go through the CZ process. You only get to go through one process. That's what's prescribed by the code. All right. I know you all have been very patient, and I want to leave time for questions. So there are the standards listed, and the standards are now contained in one central section. They'll be contained in one central section with the table of permitted uses. I'm quite proud of the standards we've recommended to you all. I hope Sean likes it.
Yes, sir, we do.
The one other major change that I want to bring to everybody's attention, two quick things. I was a little taken aback that your ordinance doesn't specify how site plans are processed and handled.
What page are you on, Mark?
I'm getting to it. Page 144. So you now have a whole new section dealing with how the staff are going to process site plans and what's required for a site plan. The information that's required, what the application process is. Sean and his staff and his cohorts need the ability to tell an applicant why an application is not complete.
And this is it.
And that's it.
Okay.
They don't have that ability right now. That's got to be very frustrating for them.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Now, the other thing is they have to be able to tell people what's required for simple projects, like a single-family residence. They don't need to go to a professional surveyor necessarily and do a full-blown 20-page construction document. They need a scale plot map. And that's what this ordinance says.
Would an architect have a different view of that?
Oh, I'm sure he
No.
or she would have a different view of it. And you know what?
Not for a single family home.
No.
Not for, you're right.
I totally appreciate that, because it's nice to have laid out what is required
Yeah.
and understand.
We have the specific standards for special events and temporary structures. We've tried to provide as much specificity as humanly possible to give applicants, the staff, everybody, here are the steps, here's how you go through our process, here's how you survive it. The other thing we're going to have to do, and this is what I identified for Randy and Sean and everybody else the last time this came up. How many people in this room think you all have landscape standards?
Street trees.
How many people think you have landscape standards?
Nope.
We don't.
We don't.
You technically do, but you don't.
Things that we don't.
You
We
don't.
just went through this with somebody.
Cardinal Woods.
You don't.
They didn't argue.
Your current landscape regulatory requirements are under your subdivision rules
Right.
and are not properly defined. They need to be moved and are going to be moved to your zoning section. I just got to find a place to put them.
Okay.
But they're going to be shown as, they're not going to be shown as a change. They got to be shown, they're going to be shown as a change because I'm moving them from one section to another. But I'm going to also have to keep the street tree section, which you do have, to go to your manager's point, to make sure that in your subdivision regs, when you're looking at subdivisions, there are going to have to be street trees required for all subdivision activity. So I've got to do I'm going to have to do a fix in your ordinance to make sure that you're given, you need the tools to be able to be successful to get what you want from a project. And the flip side of it is applicants need to have the specificity to be successful to navigate the process.
Know what the requirements are.
Exactly. So I know that's a lot to take in, and I'm not trying to speed through it, which I feel like I kind of did, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to lose you. But the goal of this was to give you traditional zoning. We've also given you development agreements that allows you to engage in the development agreement with applicants, which is important to you. It's under state law. Right now, anytime you extend utilities or other public infrastructure, roads, you'll be engaging in a development agreement with that applicant, which will help address one of your comments and concerns about what happens when a developer goes rogue. You have this nice, wonderful development agreement, but if you violate that, God help you. That's part of the reason we package this together. So I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to be finishing up the table with Sean and your manager and the rest of your staff over the next couple of days. We're going to get it to you for you to give me some tweaking, and then we'll see you in July at the planning board meeting and then the public hearing, and then you'll give me any additional feedback, and then we'll go for the approval either at that hearing or
In August.
in August, if you have some modifications you needed to do after the public hearing.
I know there was a desire to council to get this process finished before we had any more townhouse development applications. We haven't had any, so we're
So I will just share with you very briefly, because I know it's late, why I'm recommending special use. You allow some special uses. Special use is not a dirty word. I understand you're probably a little hesitant to use the process, and I can respect that. I'm not trying to ram something down your throat. I don't want you to be uncomfortable with it. I think part of the problem is it's not been used properly in terms of it's been used for the wrong process. And I understand why it probably left a bad taste in your mouth for that very reason. The application special use process for multifamily, especially when it's almost for a legislative proceeding, is not effective. And it frustrates your staff, it frustrates you, it frustrates the applicant. It's best used in proceedings where, in this particular instance, let's say you have a land use that you know you would potentially want to allow so long as it requires the applicant to provide competent material evidence that they meet XYZ standard, very specific measured standards. I also think that it would be best if the Board of Adjustment reviewed those in an evidentiary hearing, in a quasi-judicial proceeding, because they're the board that is used to doing evidentiary hearings, because they handle variances and appeals that have to be done in evidentiary hearings. That's my pitch. I certainly defer to the will of the board. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to make a recommendation, and will appreciate any feedback you wish to give. So with that being said, I'm more than happy to be quiet and answer any questions, and if not, you'll be getting some additional information from me over the next few days, and I'll be working with your staff over the next couple of weeks, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Can we add fences?
Yes,
Did we talk
I've
about-
already been asked to add fences and a few other things, and yeah.
Can you go over the administrative part that we talked about?
Yes. Sean had asked if we could add a provision dealing with administrative modification, which we can do. I've added it to most of the ordinances I administer. And just to make sure everybody's on the same page with me, in my capacity working within Focus, I serve as the planning and zoning administrator for 6 communities. So I enforce ordinances. So I'm used to this, and I understand what Sean and the rest of the staff go through. I get it. So we do try to help communities like yourselves fix what needs to be fixed. Not that I always am perfect. I wish I could say I'm perfect, but I'm not. So flexible development standards, what this section is designed to do is provide staff with some administrative leeway to do, I hate to say administrative variances, but that is basically what this is. Instead of requiring an applicant to go to the Board of Adjustment, this would provide staff the opportunity to modify or allow, under certain specific circumstances, setbacks or dimensional requirements in the ordinance under set criteria to allow for small encroachments or tweaks to the lots of record to allow for development activities to continue, without forcing the applicant to go to the Board of Adjustment, for what would ultimately be simple tweaks. Yes, sir.
I stand where it would give Sean permission to tweak minorly a lot.
Mhm.
What if it's a PUD and they want 10%, which is the number I keep saying, what if it's a PUD or major development and they want 10%? It's not a lot, it's 40 lots in a PUD,
No, that's not, this would not apply to that.
okay? So this would be for a single lot, not for a development,
Yep,
okay?
Such as stairs beyond the setback of the
Correct.
principal structure.
or the best example that I like to use is somebody goofed when they were laying the brick, and the brick extends
Porch would be a bit.
10 to 12 inches into the setback, or the porch example that just got thrown out, 10 to 12 inches. Technically, that would have to go before the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
Why wait 3 months?
And how are you gonna prove hardship on new
Right.
construction?
Right.
And it's not in the initial design, initial submittals, it's set for during.
It's discovered
Okay,
almost by accident.
Yeah.
I hate to say it that way, but it's the truth.
or somebody buys a house, something,
Yeah.
you know, how things.
Or it's, yeah, and that's an even better example. It's discovered by the second generation owner of the property when there's a survey done, an as-built, and oh my, we have 12 inches of encroachment because of the brick fascia. The bank is not going to approve my mortgage because it's non-conforming.
Just like we had over there, Birchwood, where the street was in the guy's front yard.
Yeah.
Now, to go back to your question, you can provide opportunity for a conditional zone district to be modified as part of the approval, if you choose to.
Yeah.
Now, I don't honestly think you want to approve more density, but you could provide a mechanism to say, you can tweak this process through X, Y, Z if you wanted. You don't necessarily have to say more units, more this, more that. You good with that?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
So here's what I got notes from the last meeting we had and then tonight. There was a request, we look at strengthening some of your sidewalk provisions, which is not necessarily in zoning, so I'm gonna have to figure out the best way to tackle that. There was a request that we address manufactured homes. Right now, you've got A, B, and C.
Yes.
A is double wide, B is single wide, C is a manufactured home built pre-1976, which is when HUD adopted its new standard. You don't want pre-1976 homes. So we'll deal with that. And right now, you're only going to allow manufactured homes in your A1 zoning district or in the MHP conditional zone. Massage, keep it licensed. Yep, already there. We're going to be providing definitions of state maintained road and other roadways. Some of that's already in your defined code. Section 18-57, make sure downtown's addressed. That is your
Site visibility.
that's site visibility that we've already talked about. We need to address sidewalk connectivity, covered porch enclosed, encroach into setback. Remember, we allow certain encroachments into the setback. We're going to broaden that language to ensure that an enclosed porch is not exempted from that allotment. I'll get it out in a minute, I'm sorry. Apartments, make sure it's defined. I already think it's already defined in the code. I'll just make sure it's clear. We've already talked about that. Tonight, make sure I cover firework manufacturing, the vape and smoke shop, the cannabis shop, regulate number of accessory structures. I'll figure out the best way to do that. We're going to do it as a percentage of something. I don't know what, but I'll figure it out. Any other major land uses that you think that?
In the R4, we discovered the other day, me and Ms. Jones, that a guy called duplex across the street is already been built in R4. Now it's not allowed in R4.
That's grandfather.
That was of course, but he wants to build one on the line across the street. And the first thing he tells us why
You
it's
can
not.
do it over there.
Right.
Oh, we laugh. So you want to allow it in R4?
Yes, sir. The way you got it now with the Delta, with the conditions.
All right, so you want to allow it with conditions?
Yes, sir.
Gotta have off-street parking.
Okay.
Thanks, Ann.
Oh, we're having so much fun. Anything else or other major issues that I need to address for you all to make you comfortable? And again, you're gonna have time to review this, so I don't want to make you feel like there's a gun being put to your head, but the big resolution of this is you're gonna have a conditional zoning process and you're gonna have less special uses. I'm not recommending you eliminate special uses altogether. I am gonna recommend they stay and that they're gonna be primarily reviewed through a different process. But we're gonna take the majority of the land use issues that have caused you problems and move them to conditional zoning.
Yeah. Sure does.
Well, if everybody's happy, then I'm glad you're happy. That makes me happy.
Oh, crematorium.
Oh, you're happy there.
Larry, you
Well,
want
Larry,
to
what
close
can I
out?
do to make you happy?
Larry, you
Larry, you
want,
want to close out? So we can do a motion to close out?
Huh?
Motion to close out?
Oh, okay. Being no further business to conduct, I entertain a motion to close.
So moved.
Second. Can I get a second?
I just made it.
It's right.
Second.